Well, Femi, nice to be back with you.
Yes, and with you. This is a different experience.
Yeah, something completely different for us to try. So we're going to try our first video pod.
Yeah.
And the reason for doing it is Barry Smith has kindly agreed to let us show some video footage of him teaching French. So we're going to have a look at the first 10 minutes or so of that lesson.
Yeah.
The remainder will be available for people to watch on a link.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do a sort of deep dive analysis of what we see there.
That's right. And do go back and listen to our pods with Barry. This is obviously to the listeners. If you can, prior to this, because he's quite an inspirational school leader, but made it very clear in his pods with us that start with teaching. Start with being effective in the classroom. Start by being a good example to your staff, by being able to walk the walk. And this is an example of him walking, teaching a class.
That's a great point. Okay, so let's watch the first 10 minutes of this lesson.
Yeah, okay.
This is a real coup, and I need you to show off, right? I need you to make me look good. It takes a lot to make me look good. Okay, I want this to be a podcast. I don't want to look at my face, right? So shine. Right, so what do you got? Le titre. Okay, le titre. Évidemment. Of course. Évidemment. So I'll say the English, you say the French, okay? Of course.
Évidemment.
You must.
Il faut.
Of course.
Bien sûr.
Underline the vowels. Les voyelles. In fact,
En fait,
I would say that
je dirais que
it's
c'est
very important.
très important.
Très important. Very
Très
important.
important.
Very important.
Très important.
There is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
There is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
Very often in French,
Très souvent en français.
very often
Très souvent
in French,
en français.
la lettre S à la fin est muette. Very often
Très souvent
in French,
en français.
there is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
Sometimes
Parfois,
there isn't.
il n'y a pas.
There isn't any.
Il n'y a pas.
There isn't any.
Il n'y a pas de.
There isn't any
Il n'y a pas de
liaison.
liaison.
That depends,
Ça dépend.
in fact.
En fait,
Sometimes
parfois,
the language French
la langue française
is
est
a bit
un peu
complicated.
compliquée.
But
Mais
in general,
en général,
I would say that
je dirais que
the language French
la langue française
is
est
normally,
normalement,
in my opinion,
à mon avis,
in any case,
en tout cas,
more or less
plus ou moins
logical.
logique.
Of course,
Bien sûr,
sometimes
parfois,
she isn't, because it's feminine, yeah? She isn't logical. She isn't.
elle n'est pas,
She isn't
elle n'est pas
logical.
logique.
But,
Mais
you know. T-U-S-A-I-S. La lettre S à la fin est.
muette.
La lettre S à la fin est.
Muette.
Évidemment, il faut souligner les voyelles. Ça, c'est familier, le mot tu. Est-ce que le mot tu est familier ou est-ce que le mot tu est poli? Il faut lever la main. Le mot tu, ça veut dire you, évidemment, mais c'est poli ou c'est familier? Sidona.
Would it be,
Oui, en français.
you would, well, you know, polite on,
On a deux choix. On a. One has deux choix. Deux choix.
Two choices.
Oui, on a deux choix. On peut dire on peut. Monsieur?
A little.
Non, un peu, a little, on peut.
A bit.
Non, un peu, un, un, a bit, a little. On peut. O-N.
One can.
One can, on peut dire. On peut dire. On peut dire. Brody?
One can say.
One can say, tu sais, you know, ou on peut dire vous. Et ce mot-là, ça se dit comment? That says itself how. Ça se dit comment? Évidemment, la lettre Z à la fin est...
Yes.
Donc ça, c'est tu sais. Et ça, c'est... Ça se dit comment, ça? Sidoin.
Vous avez.
Vous...
Vous savez.
Ouh, attends. Il faut faire... Attention, attention. Vous savez. You know, vous savez. Mais ça... Vous avez. Vous avez, you have. Vous savez, you know. Et tu sais. Ça, c'est poli. Ça, c'est familier. Comment dit-on? How do you say? That one, celui, celui-là, that one there, is polite. Is polite, Charlotte. Celui-là, that one there, is polite. Is polite. Poli. And if I want to say, celui-là, this one, that one there, celui-là, is familiar. Familier, familier, familier. Ok, nous allons, we're going, écrire. Écrire, écrire.
To write.
We're going to write le titre. Aujourd'hui, c'est le titre, ok? Aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui, c'est le titre. Évidemment, of course,
Bien sûr.
obviously,
Évidemment.
one is going,
On va.
one is going,
On va.
one is going,
Va.
underline,
Souligner.
underline,
Souligner.
souligner the vowels,
Les voyelles.
and
Et.
if,
Si.
if,
Si.
if
Si.
a letter,
Une lettre.
a letter
Une lettre.
is
Est.
silent,
Muette.
you must
Il faut.
add
Ajouter.
a little point.
Un petit point.
A little point.
Un petit point.
A little point.
Un petit point.
Obviously,
Évidemment.
one must. It's necessary. It's necessary. EF.
Il faut.
Underline
Souligner.
the vowels.
Les voyelles.
And
Et.
if
Si.
a letter
Une lettre.
is silent,
Et une lettre.
it's necessary. EF.
Il faut.
Add
Ajouter.
a little point.
Un petit point.
It isn't
Ce n'est pas
complicated.
compliqué.
Far from there, in fact.
Loin de là en fait.
Far
Loin.
from there,
Là.
in fact.
En fait.
Look at Zaza getting it wrong on camera. Aujourd'hui, il faut souligner les voyelles. La lettre H est muette. Aujourd'hui, il y a une apostrophe. Il faut pas oublier, il ne faut pas oublier. Il faut, you must. Il ne faut pas, you mustn't oublier. Forget qu'il y a, that there is. Que il y a, that there is. Une apostrophe. Aujourd'hui, il fait beau. Il fait beau. Il fait beau. And, la lettre T est muette. It makes beautiful and it makes hot. IFC. Monsieur.
Il fait chaud.
Il fait chaud. Il fait chaud. Also. 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 Merci. Il fait. Pardon. Il faut. Il fait. Il fait chaud. Il faut. Il fait chaud. Aussi. Aussi. One is going. One is going. Deux lettres. Deux lettres. OV. Oui.
On va.
On va. On va. On va. On va. One is going to learn. To learn. A-P-P-R-E-N-D R-E. A-P-P, la lettre P deux fois, R-E-N-D-R-E. One is going to learn. Monsieur?
Apprendre.
On va apprendre. Encore? Again?
Apprendre.
Apprendre. Encore?
Apprendre.
Encore.
Apprendre.
La lettre R. Parfait. On va apprendre. 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 Lots of. Lots of. BD. Lots of. BD. Monsieur.
Beaucoup
Beaucoup de. Beaucoup de. B-E-A-U-C-O-U-P. Beaucoup de things. 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 Choses. On va apprendre beaucoup de choses. As usual. As usual. C-O-M-M-E, espace, D', H-A-B-I-T-U-D-E. As usual. As. C-O-M-M-E. C-O-M. Jen. Comme. Comme. As usual. Comme. Comme. As usual. D', H. As of habit. As usual. As of habit. D', H-A-B-I-T-U-D-E. Monsieur? H-A-B. Habit, oui. It's like of habit. Habitude. Donc, you must
Il faut
add
ajouter
3 letters
3 lettres
at the end.
À la
à la fin.
It isn't,
Ce n'est pas
complicated.
compliqué.
You must
Il faut
add
ajouter
the letters
les lettres
U-D-E.
U-D-E.
U-D-E, ouais, c'est ça. Le titre. Aujourd'hui, il fait beau et il fait chaud aussi. On va apprendre beaucoup de choses, comme d'habitude, comme d'habitude, comme d'habitude. Right, ladies and gents.
Well, there you go. What do you make of that? General thoughts first.
Well, I think first of all, really interesting and impressive the way that he builds them up in those first couple of minutes, right? He's doing far more than just explaining the process to them, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's building them up. He's making them feel special. He's making them feel like they're getting a service and they're doing something that isn't being done in all schools around the country, which they are, and it's true. Yeah. But never underestimate how important it is to make your kids feel special and like they're getting a good provision. And he does that very, very skillfully, finishing off with the words just shine. You know,
right.
And there's so much psychology in that, isn't there? Shine.
I'd like to dive into that with you and take a look at that. Can I just say a couple of other sort of general points?
Yeah, of course.
First, one of the things I've often said when I look at lessons is I'm looking at what the kids can actually do.
Yeah.
And that's sort of evidence for how well the teaching has been working over time.
Yep.
And when I hear those kids with that quality of French accent and that grasp of a wide range of vocabulary, repeating those sentences back to him in French, they can do stuff.
Yes.
They can actually do stuff.
Yes.
So whatever he's been doing to that point has worked.
Has worked.
So I want to see, like, what is it that he's been doing?
And it's worth pointing out as well, I've spoken to Barry about this class. This is a class that he took over, I think they're year 9 or they're year 10. I said, looking at them, probably year 9. They hadn't had a good experience with French in the first 2 years. So it's not as if he's had them for like, this is the end of 4 years worth of work. It's not that at all. This is like, this year he's been working with them and they knew very little French before that. It's impressive, isn't it?
It is impressive. Can you say much about the style of French teaching? Because I know the French you've learned French as an adult. You've been in a lot of French lessons in both school and at A level, and you've obviously been abroad to study it and have some private tuition, and you know a fair bit about the sort of different schools of MFL teaching. Let's say, can you say a little bit about where you would say he falls and the kind of style that he emulates?
He talked to us, didn't he, about ripping up the book and like all the things you're taught at PGCE. I don't do any of it, and you know, I probably wouldn't go that far on this video. I haven't seen him teach many lessons. But yeah, it's interesting. He's doing quite a few things. He's exposing them to quite a lot of quite advanced terminology. I've got an example from about 2 minutes in of je dirais que, I would say that. That's called the conditional tense. You're not saying that in year 9. But he would argue, I think, you need to be able to say that, and why not introduce it to them? Why not show it to them? I'm not going through the full grammar of, you know, we put AIS on the end and we take the stem of the verb. He's not doing that. He's just saying it and getting them using it. To me, a little bit like when a child first learns a language. You know, if I hear my 4-year-old son say, well, I would say that, Dad, but he doesn't understand he's using the condition. He's just saying it because
Yeah.
it helps him
Yeah.
express himself.
Yeah.
And I think Barry's very much using that school of thought. A bit like I've talked before on the pod about Mikel Thomas,
Oui.
the language master. That's what he does. He just gets people saying stuff and gets people being able to express themselves. Because so often, I think, and you heard Lily talk a little bit about this on the pod we did with Lily, my ex-pupil. I remember her saying something like, at GCSE Spanish, I was asked to talk about like the weather and government policy or something like that. But I couldn't say simple stuff, and that frustrated me. He's doing the opposite, isn't he? He's getting them just to say stuff without all the fluff of today. We're going to learn about how we talk about the different regions of France. He's just say stuff.
It strikes me that there's kind of two directions forward, when you're learning a language. One is like how you learn naturally as a child, as you said.
Yeah.
Here's some phrases, here's how you say them, here's how you pronounce them, here's what the individual words mean. Here's some general rules for how you deal with words in a foreign language. And you can do that and have success quite easily. And if success is a precursor to motivation.
Yeah.
And it just, that seems fantastic. An alternative is to say, okay, here's how you conjugate verbs. Here are the tenses. This is the conditional tense. Here's how it differs from the imperfect tense.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, as a student, you're like, oh, this seems really challenging.
Yeah.
It seems really hard.
Especially as your contact with French is only going to be about, 2 hours a week?
Right.
To try and do that. You're not going to get too far doing that with 2 hours a week of people who possibly aren't intellectually at the top end.
Yeah.
And haven't asked to learn French. So, yeah, he's just getting them doing stuff, getting them success.
Another thing that I would say jumps out of that, participation ratio. Do you know what I mean by that, and does it strike you as well?
Yeah, so I think what you mean by that is the amount of people that are involved in the lesson at across the time we watch. Would that be right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the opposite of it would be going to watch a lesson and sit next to a boy in the back corner who does nothing for 40 minutes,
right,
apart from scribbling in his book.
Right.
That would be zero. He's doing nothing in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're participating hugely, aren't they?
Huge participation. Everyone's participating, and frequently, if not most of the time.
And also, like, we've got it currently paused at 1 minute 59. I would say as well, and you'll know what I mean, having watched many lessons, they're leaning forward, aren't they? They want to be there. I'm looking at the moment of a still of the class, and two of the girls, their eyes are fixed on him, and that's not because of like slant, steps, shape. I don't think they want to be there.
Right.
They want to hear what he's going to say next, and that's why I love it. I love it when I see that in a lesson.
Yeah. I think also one of Barry's principles, he talks about it's not complicated.
Yeah.
He tries to make it simple, anticipate the errors for students. So he's giving them ways to decode words. He's giving them ways to help understand the liaisons, the accents, and so on. And
can I give you a nice example of that?
Yeah,
actually?
yeah, please.
It's a really good example of. So I know that you know this, but for anyone who doesn't, the French wouldn't say the red car. They'd say the car red,
right.
La voiture rouge, right? And that's something that I've observed or watched teachers faff about trying to explain to kids not for hours, but for a long period, and then kids still not really get it, or getting that's stupid. Why would you do that? Why don't they just say it? Because they do kind of know why, but just being kids. And he just very cleverly, I noticed it at 3 minutes 47. He just says it a few times. The language French. And what he's doing is he's making it so that they understand what he's saying. He's talking about the French language, but he's doing it in the French way. So he's using their own language that they do understand really well to understand how the other language works. Mikel Thomas was all about that. Let's take what you know and let's apply it to this language. I don't see that being done enough.
It's
not complicated, is it?
No.
That we flip it around.
Yeah.
Sometimes the language French
La langue française
is
est
a bit
un peu
complicated.
compliquée,
But
mais
in general,
en général,
I would say that
je dirais que
the language French
la langue française
is
est
normally
normalement,
in my opinion,
à mon avis,
in any case,
en tout cas,
more or less
plus ou moins
logical.
logique.
That is brilliant, and you know he calls it dodgy English.
Yeah.
So he'll tell them he'll say the car red.
Yeah.
In English, and then la voiture rouge.
Yeah.
And that really just seems to open it up again to make it easy for the students to succeed.
Yeah.
And the question would be, how are they able to extract the general rules of
Yeah.
that from French, so that when they have to make up their own sentence, they get the word order right or the
Yeah,
grammar right.
yeah. Or if they don't get the word order right, he's able just to give them a little nod or raise his eyebrows. Like, oh, sorry, sir, it's this.
Yeah.
Because they've got a base to go from.
Another thing that on that note that really strikes me is that you get this in maths. If you explain things well and you get the success, the kids buy in and they're having success, you don't have to justify yourself as to why we're doing this.
No.
And I think it's the same there. You know, like he's not spending a lot of time trying to explain why in French they say the car red.
Yeah.
But the kids buy into it. Okay, that's what Mr. Smith said, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if we do that, we'll have more success.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You talked about participation ratio.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful bit about 3 minutes in. I got it as about 2 minutes 50 when he says a liaison in English, and he's trying to get him to say it in French, and the level of response just dips because they don't really, or some of them do, but not all of them know how to say that. But then he just says it, but some of them do, and then he just says it again, and it goes to 100% participation, and it's like we've just witnessed learning. You know, we couldn't do it, but some of our mates helped us out, so we try again, and now we can do it. And then what's really interesting is, and I bet this is deliberate from him, or it might be subconscious because he's very good. He then does it again about 5 minutes in, and he gets again the 100%. So we've now gone from not sure how to say a liaison to absolutely sure in a couple of minutes.
Well, let's have a look at that clip now.
Yeah, okay, fine.
There is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
There is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
Very often in French,
Très souvent en français.
very often
Très souvent
in French,
en français.
la lettre S à la fin est muette. Very often
Très souvent
in French,
en français.
there is
Il y a
a liaison.
une liaison.
So you had it there, a liaison, and I could pick up, they weren't quite sure. Did you get that?
Yeah.
And then he says it again, and then we go for like full volume again. We've got it.
Right. No, I want to dive into here because this is the main technique, if you like, is choral response.
Yes.
And maybe it's just worth fleshing out a little bit about choral response. There's sort of two main ways of using choral response to my eye. One is to kind of practice repeating a word or phrase. So it might be I've introduced a new word to you, inert, and now I want you to say it. So that would be I say, you say. Inert, I say, you say, and then
Inert,
I cue
yeah.
you up and you
Yeah.
all say inert. And you get to practice saying it that way. The other way, of course, to use choral response is to check answers. So you might say, okay, the answer to number 3 is on 3, 1, 2, 3, and everyone says you know the answer. So what type of historian writes about ordinary people instead of wealthy people or famous people? On 3, it's a historian. 1, 2, 3, social historian. And so you're listening to see, do they all? It's a quick check of understanding.
And I've always found that, and I've always found it quite easy for the kids. I always wonder whether that's hard enough, because we're just repeating back words that a teacher has just said. This is different, isn't it?
Well, so this is a sort of a checking in the category, because it's saying, I'm going to say the thing in English, but you're going to say it back to me in French,
Yeah.
and I'm checking. But in both cases, what's absolutely critical is the quality of the listening, the
Yes.
paying attention.
Yes.
Did 100% of students say that, and did they say it correctly? And I think there's a brilliant example in here as well, which we'll show next, where he picks up that they really didn't, like this Ilya example,
Yeah.
and breaks it down for them.
I would say that
Je dirais que
it's
C'est
Very important.
très important.
Très important. Very
Très
important.
important.
Very important.
Très important.
A less skillful teacher might have just, they seem to repeat that back. It didn't sound that bad to me from the recording, but he's obviously picked up on something. He wasn't happy with the way they joined the word très with the word important. So très important. And he breaks it down. He stops, doesn't he, there? And he breaks it down and he says, hang on, very important, very important.
But he doesn't say much, does he? He doesn't say, come on, guys, in French, we link things together. It's really, he just sort of says it again and then the hand sign, and then that means enough to them, doesn't it? That we've got to link this, we've got to liaison is important, right?
Yeah.
It's not, it takes what, 8 seconds, 10 seconds?
So, I mean, and that speaks to how well embedded the routines are, the cues. They know that the cue means off you go. They know what's expected during each phase of this lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just talk a little bit about the starter?
Yeah.
Or the start lesson? Because we had him on, and he was quite anti-written starters, right? Which would be what you and I would, envisage the start of lesson B. The class come in, they get their books out, and they begin an activity that's either on the board or on paper or whatever, and they start working through questions. He was quite anti that, wasn't he? And he said that, I said, so what do you do then? This actually might be an off-air, actually, a conversation where it wasn't.
Right,
anyway.
right.
And he said, well, I just get them in and get them saying stuff and get them talking and having success and going back over things we've done before. And that is what he's doing at the start, isn't it? He is doing a starter. He's warming them up, and he's pulling information from their long-term memory, and they're having success. Because at the first minute of after his talk about, we're being recorded, all that, he does that for about a minute, doesn't he? Just gets them speaking, gets them getting things right.
Yeah, and I think he would say that he can use that while they're coming into the classroom. They can be taking off their coats and bags while chanting in response to the translations.
And you can almost imagine being a kid walking down the corridor a bit late because you were messing around the water fountain, and you get to about 15 metres from the door and you can hear this. We're late. I've got to get in there. Can you see? Can you
Right,
that?
it's an even stronger indication that the lesson started than it is for yours or mine, where you have to actually get to the door and see that. Everyone's already sat working.
Yeah. And I can almost imagine him just, little nod of you're late. And that's all it would be. Is like, I won't do that again. Important, rather than kids just jumping over desks and talking about the weekend and messing about. Yeah, it's strong stuff. We've started. That's what it says, isn't it?
It sends a very clear message. So it's worth actually talking about the sort of overall structure of the lesson, because this first bit that we're mainly focusing on does seem to be that kind of starter.
Yeah.
It's mainly recall, and he's just dealing with little things as they come up with that choral response. But he goes on to sort of introduce a new phrase, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And through that you get to see how he's actually got to this point in the first place.
Yes, you do. You see a lovely point. I've got it as about 4 minutes 40 when he's trying to get the what is it? I think it's on say, as in one knows that he says, and just no one knows how to say that.
Yeah.
So it just goes silent, which is deliberate. It's not like an error from him. And then you see him teaching how to say that.
Yeah, that's the bit. That's a bit that stuck out to me as well.
Yeah.
So let's watch that. But just looking out for how back and forth the routine is, and then there's this one phrase he says, and there's nothing comes back.
Nothing at all.
And he goes, okay, and he just fills that knowledge gap there and then.
And I wonder if, he didn't know that they weren't going to know, and he did it, on the fly, good, I'll sort that now, or whether he got them saying a lot of stuff and getting stuff right to then not know something, so that he could then show them that you need to know this. Because we do that in maths, right? You might say, factorise this, everyone factorises it. Factorise this, everyone factorises it. How do you factorise that? Oh. And it's deliberate. It's because you want them to realise that we don't have to do that, do we? So we do this.
Right.
I wonder which one it was.
Exposing knowledge gaps. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, let's have a look at it.
Of course.
Bien sûr.
Sometimes
Parfois.
she isn't, because it's feminine, yeah? She isn't logical. She isn't.
Elle n'est pas.
She isn't
Elle n'est pas
logical.
logique. petit.
But,
Mais,
you know. T-U-S-A-I-S. La lettre S à la fin est...
US.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. That is good. That is good.
To say this is quite an interesting part of the lesson actually,
Yes,
because
you know, not one
he
of those.
gets into, he's talking about the familiar and the formal tense of tu and vous, and then he gets into the conjugation of say for the plural is savez.
Yeah.
So vous savez.
Vous savez, yeah.
Which sounds a lot like vous avez,
Yeah.
which is something that they've known. So then he differentiates those two. So on display all the time is this expertise of subject knowledge. Where are kids going to get tangled up? And the attention to detail to say, no, vous avez sounds like this, and vous savez,
Yeah.
it sounds like this.
And the other thing is, he asked quite a complicated question a minute. In French, he says something like, so if I say to say, is that the polite form or the impolite form? And I'm watching, I think, flip, they're not going to be able to understand that question in French and then give an answer in French to that. That's kind of getting on to like maybe A level, you know. And they can't really, but he's okay with that. So what the reason why I'm stressing this point is some of his questioning is whole class, everyone needs to know this.
Yeah.
And some of it is actually far more complicated. Only you know, or you know. And I think the reason why that's so important is it would make me as a learner think, I want to know more. I didn't know that. Tom did at the front, but I didn't know that. And I think that there's something to be said for that, of like showing that some people are better than others in the class.
So one thing that you noticed and you picked out there, you just mentioned, was the sign of a motivated class. And I would add a class with where routines have been very strongly embedded, is that they know at that point, this is new knowledge and I'm going to need to take some notes.
But I'm not sure they all do it. I'd say it's actually even further than routines. And what we've got is a class of, well, not a class, but we've got pupils in that class now that are leaning forward enough that they're wanting to put in place almost their own routines.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Possibly.
A bit like if you...
But I
Go
would
on.
bet they've been taught. I would bet that he's given them very clear guidance on when I come up with something new, I'm going to go to the board. You need to, make your own note.
Let's
on
watch that bit, shall we?
But,
Mais,
you know. T-U-S-A-I-S. La lettre S à la fin est...
US.
Okay, no, you're right. They all start doing it. That's a good routine. He goes to the board, he starts writing something down, and there's no need to... You're right, you should be copying it. we get this down because it's new knowledge.
Yeah, brilliant. It's very interesting to me how he sort of insists on staying in the target language a lot of the time. So when he explains the word to, he says, I don't remember the exact words, but la mode tu, c'est famille. He's telling them in French what it is.
Yeah. So you might not actually get 100% understanding because he's doing it in the target language, but I'm assuming he's making the trade-off, but you're doing it in the target language, which is important in itself.
Hearing it constantly, and I assume, that is going to be making a higher demand on your brain.
Yeah.
Right? And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Desirable challenges, right? Because then you're having to stay focused, you're having to think, you're having to really put the pieces together. Wait, what did he say? Familiar, what does that mean? Familiar?
Yeah. Familiar, yeah.
Family?
Yeah.
Those two words obviously have the same root, but you're starting to put those pieces together and think about the language.
There's a lovely bit just there. We won't go back, but if I just caught that girl in the corner, the one near the window with the plaits, just how comfortable she is in that lesson. She almost smiles and just makes a note of something. She's so comfortable being there.
Yeah.
And that's where so much lack of behaviour management comes in. It's just kids actually feeling comfortable in the lesson. So much for behaviour stuff that you see in a school is because people just aren't uncomfortable. So I chuck something to unsettle the lesson, unsettle everybody, unsettle him. They're just comfortable.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's a nice bit about 7 minutes in, 7:10 I had it down as, when you get the chance to see him, you get the chance to see how come they're able to follow what he's saying in French. Because he says, nous allons écrire, which means we're going to write. And I think in his head, he thinks that might be something they're not happy with, that sentence or that those couple of words. So he just says it, and he says it in English. And I'm pretty sure what will happen is later on he'll say it without the English. So he's building in this idea that I will support you initially, but then I'll take away the support. It's a good example of how he gets them to understand what he's saying. Because you might come in and sit there and just think, well, how come they know French? Like, how come he's able to speak to them in the target language and they're not just saying, so what does that mean? Good example, I think, of how he does it.
I think so. And let's have a look at that. And then there's another example later on, which I'd like to talk about, of the way he's scaffolding that support for students.
Because I think as a couple of non-examples of this, I've seen teachers go too far either way. So I will just speak in English because how would you possibly be able to understand the French? That's what I'm here to teach you. So it's all in English, other than a couple of words in French. That's not great. Or I will just do everything in French because I am French, maybe, and you should just be able to, and then you get I have no idea what she's talking about. He's in that sweet spot for me, in between the two.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at it.
Okay, we're going écrire. Écrire.
To write.
We're going to write le titre. Aujourd'hui, c'est le titre, okay?
It's actually better than what I thought.
Go on, unpack that a little bit.
Well, he says nous allons, which is we're going to. He knows they know the word écrire already, so then no problem.
Yeah.
We're going to write. And he takes something they don't know, he takes something they do know, and suddenly we've got something even more complicated that you do know.
Yeah.
As he would say, how hard can it be? It's not complicated, is it? But but I don't see this stuff happening in lessons, language lessons. I drop in on.
There's a lot of stuff that he's doing like that are really supporting students to make their life easier.
Yeah.
So another one that he does a bit later on that we'll have a look at in a moment is this idea of just giving them a clue by telling them the first letters of the words. So let's have a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Il fait chaud. Aussi. One is going. Deux lettres. OV. Oui.
On va.
On va. What is going to learn? A-P-P-R-E-N-D-R-E. A-P-P, la lettre P deux fois, R-E-N-D-R-E. What is going to learn, monsieur?
Apprendre.
On va apprendre. Encore? Again? Apprendre. Encore? Encore. La lettre R. Parfait.
One is going. Two letters. O-V. And then student, what would that be? Oh, on va.
Yeah.
And he does that a lot, throughout the lesson. You see that a lot later on in the lesson.
That guy at the front's quite good, isn't he? He answers about 3 or 4 things in the first 8 or 9 minutes. So we teach a lot of maths. You've got someone that's just better, quicker. Do you think he goes to him too much? Do you think he lets him bail out the class too much, or do you think it's deliberate to keep the pace up?
I think, like, traditionally, the danger that we faced with taking answers from one student is that you take it as a cue. Right, I've asked this question to the class. I've picked a student that has their hand up. They've given me an answer that affirms my belief that the class knows this, and then I've moved on.
Yeah.
And I think what he's doing here isn't quite that, because everyone else benefits from that student saying the word is écrire, or whatever it might be. So when he says to write, the hands go up and he picks him, écrire, then everyone else is just the same as Barry saying it.
That's
it
right.
keeps the lesson moving forward.
It does, and I think what also happens is écrire then enters into the group of things that I constantly question you on. Do you know what I mean? So everyone's then getting a chance to be asked that. It's not what you said people do wrong, which is, brilliant, well, we can move on then. It just becomes in the box of things we constantly say, which is where you want things to be, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that guy's kind of going first rather than being the only one.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
Just how much as a school leader now and a parent just want to see stuff like that going on in the school. Like, that's worth coming in for, right?
Right. If you're a student,
if you were getting that 5 times a day, not exactly that, but that quality or near it 5 times a day in your different subjects, whether it be PE, maths or languages, maybe just attendance rates would be just fine without us needing to give out PlayStations. Do you know what I mean?
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Can I point out something as well that I
Yeah.
really like? I think it will be intentional. I think it's a mark of the experience and the professionalism of the teacher. Have a look at this girl here.
You know. T-U-S-A-I-S. La lettre.
Left-handed.
Right.
I love it when teachers notice that a student is a lefty and they put them on the left-hand side of the row. Because so often I see lefties, I'm not left-handed, but I notice it in my students, pressed up, if she was in the seat next to her, then the right-handed student is pushing his right hand, his elbow into her left elbow.
So she's got the wall there.
So she's got the wall there.
Never even thought of that.
And I do think, looking out into your classroom and seeing what the potential barriers are for your students,
Yeah.
seeing things like that is really important and a mark of kind of a deep level of expertise.
Can I say one other thing as well?
Yeah.
He hasn't probably had to do much prep for this lesson. And that isn't a criticism. Like, I don't know how many times you've got to get this across to people. The gold standard is them doing lots, us doing little. And that's not out of laziness. That's because if they're doing lots and we're doing little, we can use our very, very, very valuable time to do other things, i.e. call their parents, tell them how great they are, or mark a really deep piece of written work they've done because we're not having to spend ages planning a lesson. Like, the goal is what we're seeing here, which is high quality lesson, low level of prep. We shouldn't be ashamed to say that. I think he's pretty much just walked in and taught this.
Yeah, maybe, but I would say this, and I say this, I've said this a lot. The preparation for this lesson was probably 15 minutes planning and 20 years experience.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not nothing.
No, and that's right. And that's not me saying to an ECT, look, he hasn't even prepared this. That's what I want you to do.
Yeah.
It's just me saying that is the gold standard.
Yeah.
Because he wants to be. He's head of this school. I think he's the head teacher of
Right.
this school. We don't see that.
No.
The head teacher.
Well, the other thing, he's very, very specific about attention to detail.
Yep.
And he works very hard on making sure his own French is extremely high quality.
Yeah, yeah.
He reads books in French.
Yeah.
He watches TV in French.
He does, yeah.
He likes to interact with French people. He doesn't like to interact with English people who speak French badly.
Yeah.
Because he wants to make sure that he is the model of perfection for these students. And I think that's what teachers should be going for more and more.
Yep.
And I do think it's a cop-out sometimes when teachers say, well, I don't have to be perfect because I want students to learn that we all make mistakes and imperfections are okay. Like, of course we all make mistakes. And when you're trying to learn a new subject, you have to push into areas where you're going to get things wrong.
Yeah.
But as the teacher, you've got to be someone worth learning from. And I do think that teacher credibility and taking pride in the quality of your own practice is something we could all take away from. Most teachers can take something away from.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, quite right. I think that's a very good point to end on, actually.
Well, I've enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've enjoyed that.
The full lesson will be available to watch. Follow the link.
Yeah.
And we hopefully maybe we can do more of this.
Absolutely.